What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another edition of Off the Top Rope here on the Off the Mic Sports Network. Thanks so much to everybody who subscribes and tunes into the channel here. And I wanted to talk on this particular video about women's wrestling and talk about a little bit about TNA. Because I feel like I haven't given TNA a lot of love. They got a big show coming up later this month. It's Slammiversary, which is a big show for them every single year in July. And a lot of women's matches were announced on Thursday's Impact. The most noteworthy being Masha Slamovich, the Impact or the TNA Knockouts champion, who's been a great champion ever since she took the title off of Jordan Grace. Interestingly enough, her next title event at Slammiversary is going to be a title for title match with whoever is the NXT Women's Champion, whether that be JC Jane or that be Jordan Grace, whoever wins the match at Evolution coming up a week from Sunday. So that's a huge deal because somebody's going to walk out both the Knockouts champion and the NXT Women's Champion in the same match. That's a huge deal. I'll get to my point in a second. Also announced on the for Slammiversary, Indy Hartwell. You guys remember Indy Hartwell from NXT? She was facing Tessa Blanchard. They've actually had a nice little, mid-card feud for the women, and that's going to be a singles match on Slammiversary. Also, the Inspiration is going to be taking on Ash by Elegance and, her little group. They're still the Knockouts tag team champions. The Inspiration, the former Iconics. Great to see Jessica McKay, the former Billie Kay, and Cassie Lee, the former Peyton Royce. Great to see them doing well. If you guys are counting, that's 3 women's matches that are going to be at Slammiversary. You guys want to know how many women's matches are happening at All In Texas the week before? 2. And one of them is a gauntlet. They have 2 matches. One of them is a gauntlet. There's only one one-on-one match. There's more matches at Slammiversary, TNA, with a, look, let's call it what it is. They've got talent on that roster, but the AEW, and I'm getting so excited that I'm going into the microphone. The AEW women's roster, with the array of talent that they have, you still have Deonna Purrazzo, who did great things in TNA. You still have Taya Valkyrie, who did great things in TNA. A lot of former TNA talent over there. A ton of people on that AEW women's roster. Britt Baker is, I guess they say, in Guantanamo Bay. I don't know, but how could you honestly look me dead in the face and tell me that Tony Khan gives a shit about women's wrestling? Because he has booked this division into oblivion. Like, he has absolutely tanked this women's division. Because how in the hell, with the amount of talent, Athena, by the way, Thunder Rosa, so I can name so many other women in this division that could easily have made a case to be on All In some form or fashion. Yet TNA has 3 women's matches on its show. One is a non-title, just grudge match. The other is a Knockouts tag team title match, and the Knockouts tag division has actually been pretty solid. It's probably the best women's tag. Like, WWE still can't figure out how to do women's tag team wrestling. And then obviously you have the championship match, which is going to be a title for title match. You want to know what's not a title for title match? Mercedes Monet and Toni Storm. Toni Storm's just defending the Women's World Championship, and I understand part of the reason why, because they already have another unification match on this show, which would be redundant, but we didn't need to do that for Okada and Omega, but they did it, and then by extension, it's hurting the rest of the division. It's just, I've gotten into hot water with some people on this channel for my criticisms of Mercedes Moné, and she deserves to bear the brunt of the blame, not the lion's share of the blame, but she deserves to wear some of the blame for where this women's division has gone, because she was brought in for a very specific reason. She hasn't lost. She's now got 1 championship. She's got 1 million championships. She's got 1 championship in AEW, and now she's going for the world championship, and there's no credible challengers, to the point where now you have literally 9 days before the show, over a week before the show, and you have literally 1 singles women's match and a gauntlet. There are 3 announced matches for TNA's Slammiversary show a week later. You don't think that's embarrassing for the array of talent and the amount of resources and the amount of money that AEW has and the credentials for the women that they have in their company? There's a lot of talented women in TNA, but the credentials and the people that are and the amount of money that is being invested into women's wrestling, at least on that end, you should have a whole lot more to show for it on your biggest show of the year. And the fact that TNA is putting AEW to shame in women's wrestling is embarrassing. It's embarrassing. Gail Kim isn't even there in TNA anymore. She may go back to WWE. I don't know. And that would be really interesting considering she's had but for whatever reason, TNA has been booking their women a hell of a lot better than AEW has. And considering the array, and maybe that's a reason why somebody like an Indy Hartwell didn't go to AEW when a lot of people thought she would. There's rumors that Isla Dawn is going to potentially go to AEW. There's rumors Dakota Kai won her non-compete. She won't show up in the gauntlet because her non-compete is not up until after that, but Dakota Kai could show up there. They already have Tekla, and Tekla has, literally been cast off into the array of talent that, is a talented group, but has no credibility whatsoever because of the point that you've literally booked this into oblivion just so you can get your dream match, Tony Khan, and say, hey, we're going to do this match no matter what the ramifications are, and we don't even have the remote resemblance of a plan for how we're going to book this women's division beyond All In. Because here's the thing, and I could talk about this in another video. They have no plan whatsoever for women's wrestling in AEW because they could not wait to get to this match with Mercedes and Tony. And for the last 5-6 weeks, they have done the bare minimum, if not worse than the bare minimum, to get you excited for what some people thought could main event this show because of the name brands that they had in this. And now TNA is doing a title for title match, and it could conceivably be Masha Slamovich versus Jordan Grace again, which they have delivered some fantastic matches if you've ever watched TNA. So that's an element. And then it could be a huge opportunity for JC Jane, potentially, who, after all of her run through, Toxic Attraction and now Fatal Influence, could potentially be a double champion by the end of this month. So whatever they sort out there, that match kind of feel like you putting the second title on the line makes the match feel bigger. I'm not saying, obviously the bigger match is Mercedes and Tony because of the name value. But if they would have just put the other title on the line, that could have put more unpredictability. It could have put more stakes in the division, whatever. You could have at least done that. But basically you're caught in a corner here because if Tony wins, she's just the women's champion. And Mercedes is still the TBS champion. So Mercedes it loses, but is still a champion. And then if Mercedes wins, she's a double champion. So it's just not a fair set of circumstances. They don't really have a plan. I don't know where this goes beyond that. And it's been a detriment to the rest of the division. Like I said, the fact that TNA has a lesser roster of talent and is able to get 3 women's wrestling matches a week later than you, and they've already announced this, and they have 3 women's matches on their show, you only have 1 singles match and a gauntlet. That's all you could do for women's wrestling, Tony Khan. That's embarrassing. And when there's an Evolution show literally the next day, your showcase for women's wrestling, when Evolution, an all-women show, granted, WWE, because they book a pay-per-view every other week, has put themselves into a corner where they have to book this in literally 5 days. That's not great, but at the same time, at least they have a roster of talent and can put together a card, with compelling matches. That's an all-women show. What the hell does AEW have to show for it? I saw some of these announcements, and then obviously, Collision's going to have an all-star 8-woman tag with all the leftover women that are going to probably end up being in this gauntlet. And seriously, It's almost like they just kind of just do whatever they want. There's the top of the food chain, and then there's just the rest of that women's division. And Tony doesn't care. It's all about, Tony Storm has been his best, character, male or female in this company, or one of the best characters that he has. And then Mercedes Monet is the shiny toy because she's got the big name and she's got all the pedigree and the credentials of who she is, the standard and all this other stuff, and doesn't want her to lose. Maybe she's got some influence on it. We don't know. And because of that, your biggest show of the year, you've got one singles match. Granted, it's a big deal, but you haven't done enough to make it feel like a big deal. Meanwhile, literally on the fly, Impact TNA Knockouts champion versus NXT Women's champion is going to be at Slammiversary. Now, obviously, Slammiversary is going to have less people in the building, but it's these little things that gives off the vibe that you actually give a shit. And it's just like, hey, we've got big names. We're just going to put those out there. We're just not going to worry about the rest of it. You've got to have depth in your division. And like you said, Indy Hartwell and Tessa Blanchard, I do not care. Listen, Tessa has got all these problems, and yet you've made a match with her and Indy Hartwell feel big enough of a deal to put it on pay-per-view in a non-title capacity. Their Knockouts tag team division is great. Inspiration. Great to see the former Iconics doing very well and back in after they both had babies. Like, that's awesome. Why can't AEW be doing some of the stuff that TNA does? They have much more resources. They have much more money. They can have bigger houses. They can do whatever they want. And yet, for some reason, when it comes to the bigger shows of this summer, when it comes to outside of WWE, one has 2 matches that are women's matches, with one being a gauntlet, and the other one has 2 singles matches. Tony Khan's absolutely tanked the women's division in AEW. There's no two ways about it. AEW just has no plan for their women's division whatsoever. Anyway, thanks so much for watching here on the channel. I'll see you guys soon. Bye-bye.